We all dream of Hollywood's golden age, a time when stars glittered like constellations, floating above the worries of ordinary life. The silver screen promised eternal fame, boundless wealth, and untouchable glamour. But behind that dazzle was a carefully constructed illusion, manufactured by the powerful studio system.
Nazi prison camp? When I climb out of this hammock, I want you to give me a good poke in the nose.
Studios invented names, rewrote pasts, and controlled every aspect of their stars' lives, on and off camera. Fame was a product, not a promise. Beneath the shimmering gowns and polished smiles, many stars lived a grimmer reality marked by poverty, addiction, and abandonment. In this video, we'll reveal 17 Golden Age stars who tragically died in poverty. Prepare to witness heartbreaking stories of how fame betrayed its brightest lights. Judy Garland. Judy Garland, born Frances Ethel Gum, was America's sweetheart, a child prodigy whose voice soared with Over the Rainbow and whose screen presence captivated millions in classics like The Wizard of Oz. She was a symbol of youthful innocence and boundless talent. Yet, behind the dazzling smile and powerful voice, her life was a relentless struggle, a stark contrast to the joy she brought to audiences. Signed to MGM at just 13, Garland was notoriously overworked and underpaid, a common plight under the studio system's demanding contracts. The studio exerted immense pressure on her about her looks and weight, leading them to provide her with amphetamines to boost energy and control weight, and other substances to help her sleep. This early, forced exposure to medication tragically led to a lifelong struggle with substance abuse. This direct intervention by her employer fostered a severe reliance and addiction. Her addiction, in turn, impacted her reliability and performance, leading to career instability. By 1950, MGM, citing her emotional and physical difficulties, unceremoniously dropped her from her contract. Despite her immense talent and later concert successes, including a critically acclaimed Carnegie Hall concert, Garland faced severe financial difficulties. Her struggles with addiction, combined with alleged mismanagement and embezzlement by others, left her deeply in debt, owing hundreds of thousands in back taxes to the IRS. Her net worth at the time of her passing in 1969 was reportedly only $40,000, a paltry sum for a star of her magnitude, with many philanthropic requests in her will unfulfilled due to her overwhelming debt. Judy Garland died in London in 1969 from an accidental barbiturate overdose at the age of 47. Her final London performances were often described as an emotional car crash, a painful reflection of her deteriorating health and mental state. Her life was plagued by illness, exhaustion, nervous breakdowns, and near-fatal drug reactions, all direct consequences of years of addiction and the relentless pressures of her career. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi, the Hungarian-born actor, etched his name into cinematic history with his chilling portrayal of Count Dracula in the 1931 horror classic. His slow, thickly accented voice and sinister elegance made him an unforgettable icon of the genre, defining the vampire archetype for generations. Despite his star-making turn, Lugosi was heavily typecast, primarily offered similar villainous roles, which limited his career versatility. He was also described as a pathetically poor businessman with no concept of how to market himself, often moving erratically from leading roles in major productions to minor parts in much smaller ones. This combination of severe typecasting and poor financial choices meant he could never consistently hold on to his income. Much of his fortune, earned during his peak, was squandered on drugs and alcohol, further exacerbating his financial woes. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, his star had faded significantly, and he found himself appearing in numerous low-budget, forgettable films, including notorious collaborations with the infamous director Ed Wood. His decline into obscurity was accompanied by a growing dependence on narcotics, leading him to voluntarily commit himself to a state hospital for drug addiction in 1955. Bela Lugosi died in 1956 of a heart attack in his sleep, at the age of 73. At the time of his death, he had a mere $1,900 in his bank account and $1,000 worth of real estate. His final impoverished years were a stark contrast to the on-screen grandeur he once commanded. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake, with her iconic peekaboo hairstyle, was a quintessential Hollywood femme fatale of the 1940s, captivating audiences in film noirs with Alan Ladd and films like Sullivan's Travels and I Married a Witch. Her beauty, mysterious aura, and distinctive look made her an instant star. By the late 1940s, Lake's career began a sharp and tragic decline, due in part to her escalating alcoholism. Her life off-screen was plagued by a series of personal tragedies and struggles, including a controlling mother, 3 failed marriages, a secret abortion, and underlying mental illness, specifically a schizophrenia diagnosis. A miscarriage and string of failed marriages further contributed to her spiraling alcoholism. Without diverse roles or a broader foundation for her stardom, Lake's financial stability collapsed, leading to her dying penniless. She spent her dwindling fortune on alcohol as her career went south, leaving her with nothing. She died alone and financially broke at the age of 51 in 1973 from liver and kidney damage, directly linked to her alcoholism. In a truly heartbreaking detail, her ashes were left unclaimed for years due to unpaid funeral expenses. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was one of Hollywood's most prolific and highest-paid actors, a true child prodigy who began his career at just 17 months old. He starred in over 300 films, notably the popular Andy Hardy series, and was a major box office draw in the 1930s and 40s. His early career was marked by immense success and seemingly endless potential. Despite earning millions throughout his decades-long career, Rooney's personal life was fraught with financial troubles. He struggled with gambling and alcohol, filing for bankruptcy not once, but twice. In his vulnerable later years, he allegedly suffered severe physical and financial abuse at the hands of his 8th wife and her son. These individuals were accused of misappropriating millions of dollars of his assets, leaving him in dire straits. Rooney's financial downfall, despite massive earnings, highlights the critical vulnerability of stars to financial exploitation, especially in the absence of robust personal financial management or protective industry mechanisms. Rooney earned a vast fortune during his career. However, a combination of personal struggles and, more critically, alleged financial abuse and misappropriation by family members led to his wealth being drained. This resulted in multiple bankruptcies and his death with only a small fraction of his fortune remaining. When Mickey Rooney died in 2014 at the age of 93, his once multi-million-dollar fortune had tragically dwindled to just $18,000. This meager sum was willed to a different stepson and his wife, who had provided care for him in his final years. Rooney's case brought significant national attention to the insidious issue of elder abuse within Hollywood and beyond. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was the innocent, cherubic face of Disney, starring in popular live-action pictures like Song of the South and Treasure Island, and famously providing the voice and live-action reference model for the animated Peter Pan. He was a beloved child actor with a seemingly limitless future. His promising career was tragically cut short when his final long-term contract with Disney was prematurely terminated in the mid-1950s, officially due to severe acne. This perceived imperfection led to increasing indifference from Hollywood studios, who quickly moved on. Without the structure of a studio contract and facing rejection, Driscoll descended into addiction and frequently fell afoul of the law, resulting in continuous withdrawals of acting offers. Driscoll's rapid decline from child star to penniless death shows the immense pressure and profound lack of support systems for child actors in the golden age, once their cuteness faded or personal issues arose. This abrupt loss of purpose contributed to his descent into drug addiction, which then depleted his funds and led to his homeless, penniless death. In ill health from his substance abuse and with his funds completely depleted, Driscoll's initially unidentified body was discovered on March 30th, 1968, in an abandoned building in the East Village of Manhattan. The medical examination determined he died of heart failure caused by advanced hardening of the arteries due to long-term drug abuse. In a final, heartbreaking indignity, when his body went unclaimed, he was buried in an unmarked grave on Hart Island, New York City. Buster Keaton. Joseph Frank Keaton, famously known as Buster Keaton, was one of the silent era's biggest stars, a comedic genius alongside Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd. His great stone face and incredible physical comedy, characterized by remarkable stunts and innovative special effects, captivated audiences worldwide. For most of the 1920s, Keaton operated as an independent filmmaker, maintaining complete creative control over his work. However, this era of artistic freedom came to a devastating halt. In 1928, Keaton made what he later called the worst mistake of my career. His producing partner, Joe Schenck, sold Keaton's contract to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, the biggest studio at the time. Despite a lucrative offer of a $3,000 weekly salary and a percentage of film gross, Keaton lost his creative control and was at the mercy of the studio system. MGM systematically tried to stamp out his individuality, complicating his simple plots with excessive dialogue and forced actor pairings that conflicted with his pantomime style. This erosion of creative autonomy under the studio system's tight control fundamentally undermined his artistic output. Compounding his professional woes, Keaton struggled with personal issues, including a difficult divorce from Natalie Talmadge, who took everything including their estate and children. He also battled alcoholism and eventually filed for bankruptcy in 1932. By 1933, MGM fired him, and his reputation as poison in Hollywood meant no other major studios would hire him. Keaton continued to struggle with his health and finances, eventually returning to MGM in 1940 as a comedy consultant for a mere $100 a week, a truly humbling period for a former superstar. While his exact net worth at death is disputed, some sources say $10 million, others imply financial struggles. His career's dramatic decline and periods of severe financial distress are well documented. Buster Keaton died in 1966 at the age of 70. Hattie McDaniel. Hattie McDaniel made history as the first African American to win an Academy Award, receiving the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her iconic role as Mammy in the 1939 film Gone with the Wind. Her powerful presence and ability to bring depth to often stereotypical roles made her the most visible African American actress in Hollywood during her time. She was also a talented singer-songwriter, comedian, and radio performer, achieving the historic milestone of being the first African American woman to sing on general audience radio. Despite her groundbreaking success and considerable earnings, McDaniel's career began to decline by the end of the 1940s. This was primarily due to the prevailing racial typecasting in Hollywood, which limited her to playing maid roles, and these roles were gradually disappearing. Black audiences also criticized her for perpetuating negative stereotypes, making her a polarizing figure, even though she famously stated, "I'd rather play a maid than be a maid." This pressure to conform to limited roles, combined with criticism from her own community, created an untenable situation that stifled her artistic growth and career longevity. The industry's systemic racism, which confined Black actors to narrow, often demeaning roles, directly contributed to her career's premature decline, regardless of her talent or success. McDaniel returned to radio, starring in The Beulah Show in 1947, the first radio show to star an African American. However, she only recorded a few episodes before contracting breast cancer, which made her too ill to continue working. Hattie McDaniel died in 1952. At the time of her death, her estate was valued at less than $10,000. Much of her earnings had been used up during her illness or generously donated to charities and scholarships she supported throughout her lifetime. Her will bequeathed only $1 to her former husband. Her death, in relative poverty despite her iconic status and historic achievements, prompted the Hollywood community to create the motion picture and television Country House and Hospital, a fund to help those in the industry who were struggling. George Raft. George Raft, with his slicked-back hair and sharp suits, became a prominent figure in Hollywood, largely remembered for his stylish gangster roles in films like Scarface, Each Dawn I Die, and Some Like It Hot. He was reported to be Hollywood's highest-paid star in 1933, and even had his hands set in cement outside Grauman's Chinese Theater. However, Raft's real-life connections to the underworld and his poor professional choices ultimately led to his financial ruin. He was known for his love of gambling, horses, and women, spending his estimated $10 million earnings lavishly. He famously said, "I wish I knew where it went, and part of the loot went for gambling, part for horses, and part for women. The rest I spent foolishly." His mistrust of novice directors and his reluctance to play unredeeming anti-heroes led him to turn down iconic roles in films like High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon, roles that subsequently launched Humphrey Bogart's legendary career. This pattern of declining pivotal roles due to misjudgment or stubbornness proved to be a critical factor in his career's decline. By the post-war years, his stardom was sidelined. He was caught up in tax evasion, questioned about the gangland hit that killed his childhood friend Bugsy Siegel, and was eventually banned from England in 1967 as an undesirable due to his supposed unsavory connections. Raft was reduced to working as a goodwill ambassador for a Las Vegas hotel, lending his name to a failed discount chain and running a casino in Havana until Castro took power. George Raft died from emphysema in 1980 at the age of 79. He left behind no will, and his estate consisted of only a $10,000 insurance policy and some furniture. His final film was released the same year he died, suggesting he continued to work out of necessity, not just passion. Lupe Velez. Lupe Velez, known as the Mexican Spitfire, captivated audiences with her wild movements and overwhelming charisma, becoming a sensation in Mexico before her Hollywood breakthrough. Her role opposite Douglas Fairbanks in The Gaucho, 1927, thrilled critics and audiences alike, and she worked steadily in ethnic sexpot roles, with her star on the rise. Her greatest success came with the Mexican Spitfire series, where she played the highly stereotypical Carmelita. However, Velez's career was never what it could have been due to pervasive racism and typecasting in Hollywood. She was consistently confined to roles as Señorita Cyclone or Hot Tamale, and the press often pitted her against other Latina actresses, painting her as common. Her English was reportedly fouled up in interviews and scripts to fit a Mexican stereotype, despite her personal embarrassment. This systemic typecasting and exploitation of her ethnicity prevented her from achieving broader, more nuanced roles. By the late 1930s, fewer film proposals came her way, and she found it difficult to find work at major studios, leading her to make films in England, France, and eventually return to Mexico, where she became a top star in Mexican movies. Her personal life was constantly in the news, characterized by public fighting and a devil-may-care attitude. Velez's mental state began to deteriorate, and by 1944, she was pregnant with Harold Ramon's child, who refused to marry her. As a devout Catholic, she believed there was no other way out. Lupe Velez died at age 36 in December 1944 of an intentional overdose of the barbiturate drug Seconal. While some reports claim she was zonked by debt and her mortgage was overdue, other sources indicate she was earning a substantial $1,500 per week for the Mexican Spitfire films, suggesting she was at the top of her earning potential. Her estate was valued at $125,000. Her death and the circumstances surrounding it were the subject of much speculation and controversy, with some suggesting it was the result of untreated mental illness. Her tragic end, regardless of her exact financial standing at the moment of death, underscores the profound personal cost of navigating a prejudiced and unforgiving industry. John Garfield. John Garfield established himself as an earthy, rebellious, and electrifying presence on the screen with his 1938 debut in Four Daughters. He frequently portrayed defiant working-class characters in films like They Made Me a Criminal, Dust Be My Destiny, and later in classics such as The Postman Always Rings Twice, with Lana Turner, and Gentleman's Agreement. His authentic performances resonated deeply with audiences. However, Garfield's life and career were tragically cut short by the pervasive fear and paranoia of the Red Scare in Hollywood. He was called to testify before the U.S. House Committee on Un-American Activities, HUAC. Despite denying communist affiliation, he famously refused to name names, a decision that effectively ended his film career. This blacklisting meant he was blocked from employment as a film actor for the rest of his life. His generosity in signing petitions and writing checks for causes he believed in, particularly to help the poor, was later used against him by publications listing donations to communist fronts, ending careers overnight. The stress of this persecution, combined with a pre-existing heart condition, he had contracted scarlet fever as a child, which led to permanent heart damage, is widely believed to have contributed to his premature death. John Garfield died young and alone at the age of 39 in 1952, just a few days after separating from his wife. His death was attributed to a heart attack. Carol Landis. Carol Landis was a talented actress, singer, and writer, known for her beauty and musical performances. She gained recognition as a GI goddess for her tireless efforts entertaining U.S. troops during World War II, traveling over 125,000 miles and visiting more military bases than any other actress. Her breakthrough film role was in 1 Million BC, 1940, and she even co-authored and starred in Four Jills in a Jeep, a film based on her wartime experiences. Despite her patriotic contributions and early success, Landis's career began to fade in Hollywood. She was plagued by depression throughout her life and had attempted suicide in 1944 and 1946. Her mental health deteriorated amidst career struggles and personal challenges. The film adaptation of her book did lackluster business, and Fox dropped her contract, leading to roles in B-movies. Her marriage was also failing, and she became involved in a relationship with married actor Rex Harrison. Landis was reportedly crushed when Harrison refused to divorce his wife for her. This combination of a fading career, ongoing mental health struggles, and a devastating personal betrayal created an overwhelming sense of despair. Carol Landis tragically committed suicide on July 5, 1948, at the age of 29 by taking an overdose of Seconal in her Pacific Palisades home. Rex Harrison was the last person to see her alive and discovered her body. Her fading career struggles, and personal challenges which led to her suicide strongly imply financial distress and a lack of resources. Tom Neal. Tom Neal was a good-looking athletic actor who showed promise in B-movies and serials in the 1940s, notably his co-starring role in the critically lauded film Noir Detour. He was a reliable member of the MGM family early in his career, even appearing in the big-budget Strange Cargo. However, Neal's career and life were ultimately destroyed by his violent temper and involvement in a series of shocking scandals. A critical turning point occurred when he made an unwelcome pass at Joan Crawford, leading to his removal from Strange Cargo and eventual dismissal from MGM. His career then shifted to low-budget Poverty Row Studios. The most infamous incident was his 1951 public fistfight with fellow actor Franchot Tone over actress Barbara Payton, which left Tone hospitalized with severe injuries. This scandal made national headlines and severely damaged Neal's already struggling career, essentially closing Hollywood's doors to him. The industry, despite its own moral ambiguities, would quickly distance itself from public scandal to protect its image. Neal's life continued its downward spiral. His business failed, and he was forced to file for bankruptcy. In 1965, a terrible piece of personal tragedy sealed his fate. His wife, Gail Bennett, was found shot dead, and he was later convicted and imprisoned for involuntary manslaughter. After his release from prison, Neal's world had contracted, with everything in decline: his stature, bank account, and lifestyle. He sold everything he owned and moved to Palm Springs, working as a gardener. While he initially claimed to have found peace, financial troubles continued to pile up, forcing him to seek refuge with his family in Evanston, Illinois, who often covered his costs. Tom Neal died of heart failure in 1972 at the age of 58, found dead in his bed by his son in North Hollywood. Alma Rubens. Alma Rubens was a dark-eyed, distant beauty who quickly rose to stardom in the silent film era, becoming a major star by 1920. She had top billing in every film she appeared in by 1918, and her earnings reached as much as $3,000 a week at the height of her career. However, Rubens' life was tragically scarred by failed marriages and a severe drug addiction, which eventually ended her career. She developed an addiction to heroin after being prescribed morphine for a physical ailment, later transitioning to cocaine. Her earnings were squandered in search of her next high, Her drug use and difficult behavior on set led to her removal from films, and her addiction became public knowledge. By the late 1920s, Rubens was in constant trouble with the law, in and out of hospitals and sanatoriums, and her personal life was spiraling out of control. Despite efforts to stage a comeback with vaudeville tours, her financial situation remained dire. Although she was briefly financially supported by William Randolph Hearst, her earnings were largely depleted by her addiction. Alma Rubens died on January 21, 1931, at the young age of 33, from lobar pneumonia and bronchitis, shortly after being arrested for cocaine possession. Her death, a direct consequence of her long battle with addiction, left her in a state of destitution. Art Acord. Art Acord was a true cowboy, a rodeo champion who became one of the first real cowboys to work in movies. Starting his career in 1909, he was a popular silent Western star for a decade, even serving in World War I and earning the Croix de Guerre for bravery. However, Acord's greatest nemesis was alcoholism, which ultimately led to the decline of his film career. In 1928, during his third marriage, he lost his job, was involved in bar fights, and was arrested for bootlegging. His inability to adapt to the advent of talkies further contributed to his decline. In an attempt to revive his ailing movie career, he went to Mexico, where he made some stage appearances before eventually working in the Gasper mines. In the final years of his life, Acord had filed for bankruptcy and was in and out of trouble with the law. His move to Mexico and work in mining clearly indicate a severe decline in his financial stability. Art Acord died on January 4, 1931, at the age of 40 in a Chihuahua, Mexico hospital. The official cause of death was a stroke brought on by alcoholism. However, there are conflicting reports. Some claim he died by cyanide poisoning, intentionally taken due to depression, while others insist he was murdered by a Mexican politician. Regardless of the exact cause, his death was a tragic end to a once promising career, marked by addiction and financial ruin. Larry Semon. Larry Semon, the American silent film comedian, had a hugely successful career that seemingly disappeared overnight. He began as a newspaper artist, then became an assistant director, and by 1916 was directing and starring in his own comedies for Vitagraph. By 1919, he had a 3-year contract worth an astonishing $3,600,000, a sum second only to Charlie Chaplin. However, Semon's career began a sharp decline. He was fired by Vitagraph in 1924 and ventured into feature films, notably producing and starring in The Wizard of Oz, 1925. This film proved to be a financial disaster. Semon was notoriously bad at budgeting and financing his own films, despite insisting on producing and budgeting them with other people's money. This lack of financial acumen and the massive failure of The Wizard of Oz led to his downfall. By 1926, his slapstick comedy style had become outdated, and his films were no longer successful at the box office. To maintain his finances, he resorted to directing at Paramount and performing vaudeville. The strain of his dire financial circumstances and the continuous worry undermined his health. Larry Semon died penniless in 1928 at the age of 39. He had declared bankruptcy in March 1928, listing debts at nearly $500,000. He suffered a nervous breakdown and then died suddenly of pneumonia. Marie Prevost. Marie Prevost was a Canadian-born film actress, a vivacious and charming leading lady of the silent era who became a prominent embodiment of the jazz age in films like Moonlight Follies and The Married Flapper. Between 1921 and 1928, she was one of Hollywood's most popular actresses. However, with the transition to sound films in the late 1920s, Prevost struggled to adjust to the new medium, and her career began to decline. Compounding her professional challenges were significant personal problems, including the death of her mother in 1926 and the breakdown of her marriage in 1927. Prevost sought comfort in alcohol and began drinking heavily, leading to depression and binge eating, which resulted in weight gain. This weight gain made it increasingly difficult for her to secure acting jobs, and she was relegated to supporting roles and eventually bit parts in Poverty Row productions. Her financial situation deteriorated dramatically as she ran out of money, becoming more reliant on alcohol. She was on a downward spiral, starving herself to try and stay in movies. Marie Prevost died of acute alcoholism at the age of 40 on January 21, 1937. Her body was not discovered for 2 days, only after neighbors complained about her pet dachshund, Maxie's incessant barking. The police report noted teeth marks on her body, indicating the dog had tugged at her in an attempt to arouse her. Prevost died a pauper, with her estate valued at just $300. Her destitution prompted Hollywood to form the Motion Picture Relief Fund and the Motion Picture Country Home and Hospital to care for their own in old age and poor health. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, the dashing Australian-American actor, achieved worldwide fame during Hollywood's golden age, becoming a movie star in 1935 with his lead role in Captain Blood. He followed this with numerous successful swashbuckler films like The Charge of the Light Brigade and his most famous role, The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, earning him $3,600 a week and a Life magazine cover. However, Flynn's life was a whirlwind of hedonism and self-destruction, which ultimately led to his financial ruin and early death. He was known as a brawler, hellraiser, hedonist, world-class carouser, indiscriminate lover, drunkard, and drug addict. He struggled to hold down jobs in his youth, left debts behind, and was frequently taken to court by his first wife for missing alimony payments, which eventually cost him his infamous Mulholland Farm estate. This pattern of reckless spending, legal troubles, and a disregard for financial responsibility consistently undermined his substantial earnings. His lifestyle choices directly contributed to his financial instability, regardless of his box office success. By the post-war years, his health problems, including hepatitis and cirrhosis of the liver, began to take a toll, aging him prematurely and making it hard to find work. He was saddled with alimony, child support payments, and other debts. He attempted to produce The Story of William Tell with his own funds, but the project fell apart mid-shoot, leaving him financially ruined. His business manager also died after embezzling money, further exacerbating his financial woes. He was forced to sell his acreage and was reduced to hustling for money, even taking work in television, which few film stars would deign to do at the time. Errol Flynn died on October 14, 1959, at the age of 50 from a heart attack, with liver degeneration and sclerosis as contributing factors. While he earned an estimated $7 million during his career, he reflected, "I did not deserve it, but I certainly didn't mind spending it." At his death, he was deeply in debt and had little to nothing left of his fortune. These legendary stars brought joy, glamour, and unforgettable performances to the world, yet their final years were marked by struggle. Whose story touched you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories of Hollywood's past.